Appreciate the opportunity. You heard kind of the intro, but I've been at Colliers, Bret Swango, been at Colliers 11 years. And really my job is to monitor how is the world changing, and then how do we translate that change into location-based insights to help inform our occupier clients like LinkedIn about how to, why they should be putting what where as it pertains to their real estate strategy. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Armin over the last, on and off for various firms over the last kind of half decade. And we invited him to our innovation summit. He gave a presentation, I gave a presentation, and I told him, hey, I'm presenting this thing at RETCON. I'd love it if you, if you have interest, I'd love for you to join me. And he's like, absolutely. So they've got some really cool things that they're doing, and I'm looking forward for you guys to mostly hear from this guy, but the opportunity to share the stage. Armin?
Yeah, thanks, Bret. So Armin Vartanian, I'm the Vice President of Workplace at LinkedIn. I've been a workplace executive for the better part of the last 20 years at companies like LinkedIn. This is actually my second tenure. Prior to that, I was at Okta as a Senior Vice President, helping scale companies anywhere from 100 people up to 20, 25,000 employees around the world. At LinkedIn, we're about a 20,000 person company with a 7 million square foot portfolio around the world in 38 markets. This is a topic that I feel very strongly about. I'm more excited about our industry than I've ever been in the past. I think we're at the intersection of a lot of the disruption that's happening across technology and how AI is going to be transforming the world, and specifically the workplace environments, and why workplace environments are going to be a force multiplier in the future, predicated around people, relationships, as well as leveraging some of the technologies that you all have come to learn and hear about on a daily basis, it seems, over the past couple of years. So before we get into some of the tactics that we're doing at LinkedIn and what I think the industry should be thinking through, I thought it'd be best if I position this as like a convo with Bret as a fireside chat. And obviously we don't have the slides today, but Bret can come at it from the perspective of the macro, and I'll come at it from the perspective of the occupier. So Bret, you want to kick it off? I know we've talked a lot about the bullishness across CEOs that have been polled around the value of AI and what they're seeing, but the actual payoff of those investments are going to take far greater time than the investments that are being made today. And how do you see that kind of playing out?
Yeah, and I'll jump on that in a minute, but real quick, just since it's a smaller venue, by show of hands, who in the room is a office, or call it an owner? Or what percent represent owners? Landlord, okay. And then what about on the tech side? How many represent tech? Okay, beautiful. So kind of 50-50, great. So what we are seeing just from a data perspective, so what I'm always looking at is what do CEOs care about and what do capital allocators care about? Because that is very, over 10 to 12, 24 months, that's ultimately going to translate into real estate decisions. And so when you look at, I think it's Deloitte does one of the largest CEO surveys that I'm aware of, and they say, my biggest challenge as a CEO is, and then they do one of those word clouds. By far the biggest word in there is pace of change, right? I mean, I always ask the question, who in the room thinks the world is changing faster today than it did yesterday, or maybe it ever has? Show of hands, anybody? Yeah, okay. Who thinks it's going to change tomorrow faster than it is today? Yeah, okay, same hands. So that's like one big change. And then uncertainty is the other one. So pace of change, uncertainty, technology, access to talent, AI. Those are the big things that CEOs care about, basically in that order. And then in terms of when I'm trying to, the $1 million question is you read about every day is, hey, there's been all this investment in AI. When is the payoff going to happen? So there was another survey by KPMG that basically says, hey, when do you expect a return on that investment? And it was the most, and I think with some of what's happened with Clawbot and the new Claude code over the last 4 to 8 weeks, I think it probably allayed a lot of those concerns in terms of, hey, are these things ever going to actually be productive? Because the amount that those tools can do today. I saw a podcast that came out a couple weeks ago, and it said February 2026, the month that AI awoke. And I think that's very astute. But basically the punchline of this was the CEO survey said that as of last year, December of 24, when they surveyed CEOs and said, hey, when do you expect a return? Only 20% thought they were going to see a return on their AI investment within a year. They took that a year later, so December, 3 months ago, that was almost 90%. I say if they would have done that, 2 weeks ago after these tools were released, that would be 100. So we're seeing that, we're feeling that. I think that's an unequivocal trend that's kind of playing out right now in terms of the certainty of the return. And then I think the next $1 million question is obviously, what does that mean for the people in the workplace? Armin, where do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Bret's point, the rate of change is faster than the actual human mind can adapt to right now. It feels like every 6 months we're getting some new media headlines that like this is the next industrial revolution. And I think like during the pandemic and all the digital tailwinds and cloud software take up during that time frame, it was positioned as such, and now it's like, every 6 months it feels like there's other massive technological shifts, and most recently around agentic work. It's hard for executives, whether you're in technology or for myself who leads workplace for large enterprises, for us to go predict the future. And that makes uncertainty really high. And so we're really indexing on a couple stances. High conviction that kind of guide us to where the puck is going effectively. And so first and foremost, there's 3 stances. Information is commoditized today. Everybody has access to an LLM. That LLM indexes across most public sites around the world or on the World Wide Web. Institutional knowledge is not. 2, relationships are the foundation of trust. Trust leads to collaboration, creativity. That stuff drives product innovation, product development velocity. The last one is organizational structures are going to change. They're already changing. Your prototypical, hierarchy of orgs that operate in a linear, static form are antiquated already. The best companies in the world are adopting organizational models that create a ton of agency for employees. There's going to be blurred lines around what employees are doing today and what they're doing in the future in terms of their org. So at LinkedIn, we call this the full product builder, whereas historically during a product development cycle, you obviously have a product manager driving a product, leading a set of engineers to go build something. It gets QA'd, it goes into the design process for UX, you iterate, and that's generally a linear process to go and develop. Product managers today have access to tools that can maybe construe themselves as like engineers. They can QA it through some of these coding tools like Cursor or Windsurf. And so again, I think what you'll end up seeing is organizations that are effectively thousands of startups within one. Shipping product faster and faster. So I'll stop there because I'm getting into a little bit more of the tactical stuff, but it's an incredibly exciting time. If you think about that and get proactive, you'll be able to go structure not just the workplace environments and how you design and build it, but also you'll, I think, align how your real estate footprints around the world, your portfolios, the amenitization of those buildings to the needs of the occupiers.
Yeah, well, I think we maybe stick to, or I'll ask the audience again, how many of you are using some type of AI tool on a daily basis? Show of hands. And how many of you that raised your hand there are using it for something besides like, draft this email for me, or, like how many of you have it, I'll call it ingrained in like a workflow, and or it's doing something that formerly was done by a human? Okay, yeah, I would, obviously this conference is probably a little more tech forward. I remember I spoke in Detroit and I spoke in Kansas City in April of last year. And it was a room probably 3 times the size of this in both environments, probably 10 years older, I would say on average. So, but I asked, raise your hand if you've heard of the term agentic AI. In neither of those rooms did anyone raise their hand. Right, and that was April, and again, that was all real estate audience. So again, just to hint on the rate of change, and something else that we were, I was on the phone today. We were pitching, not pitching. We were working on a large headquarters requirement, like 1,000-person plus headquarters relocation. We got the question from the leadership of, hey, should our tech, because this is like I'll call it a industrial company, but again, it's a headquarters. So they're like, hey, should our technology team, does that need to be co-located with our headquarters and operations? And something that Armin and I have spent a lot of time talking about the last 24 hours is how the technical barriers are eroding. And now it's really about agency, it's about creativity, it's about context, and how much are you and or your team leading into those tools. You no longer need I'll call it the core like technical requirements. So again, probably something you all experienced and or noticed, but something that he and I have spent a lot of time talking about, but just kind of, I guess, going down that same track and kind of going back to the path that you were going down, Armin. What I thought was fascinating, we were together in LA at our Innovation Summit, was tactically what you guys are doing to the space that I think will be very interesting to both the investor community in the room and also the building owners in terms of how you think about building out physical environments to get the best out of people in this next generation of work.
Well, so the pandemic and like the result. So I for context for a lot of you guys, I led this initiative called Dynamic Work at Okta before I was at LinkedIn. This is during the years of 2015 and 2022-ish when I was there. And we launched this thing in 2018. And essentially it was like, hey, predicated on these demographic changes, the profiles of the employees that we had in our offices and those that we were going to be hiring in the future, and how flexibility was really important for them. And so we devised this thing. But we created a geo workforce strategy around this and co-located a bunch of different organizations across different markets to accommodate the flexibility. But the way I think about it is, coming out of the pandemic, and nobody wants to go and experience that again, where everybody's working remotely and digitally, and it's like work becomes very transactional in that sense, right? And this is one of the reasons why employers have called their employees back. We have network data, network graph data. So this is not just like network data. This is actual like system data usage of all of our employees at LinkedIn to identify who they're actually collaborating with on a daily basis. And we saw during the pandemic that silos got smaller, work became more transactional. Nobody wants that, right? It's ineffective. It's not the kind of ethos of companies and team-based environments. I bring that up because, now that employees have generally come back, et cetera, what we're seeing in markets is like this massive bifurcation around B, C types of environments, Class B, C types of buildings, and Class A. And that bifurcation is predicated really around this like highly amenitized, hospitality-focused types of environments. Employers are spending a little bit more dollars on per foot to go and attract talent back into the office and make that experience curated, exceptional, but really to go and drive a value proposition of being together, okay? That is a step function, just like hybrid was a step function to what we're dubbing at LinkedIn calling the relationship workplace in the future, okay? I believe, this is again based on these convictions and these stances that we have, is that in the future there's going to be a trend for greater levels of revenue per employee. We're already seeing team sizes get smaller, especially in tech, because of this agency, because of this increased product velocity for employees to have with the access to this technology, go do more with less. But at the same time, the spaces, the buildings that these employees are being called into, because of this collaborative environment that is so important, the relationship-based environment that's so important to kind of amplifying just the transactional side of the AI workflows and the agentic workers that are going to be working alongside humans, is that technology needs to be integrated into these spaces. And it's not just the spaces, it's also the buildings. And so you'll see a new bifurcation of building class. For those that have the tech-enabled environments, the ambient buildings, the ambient conference rooms that allow workers to access the same types of information that they've been accessing to make the software that's so popular today in the enterprise types of environments in a secure manner. And if you guys are really following like the agentic workspace, you guys will probably know a little bit about OpenClaw and how a lot of that stuff has just been like taking off like a rocket. And now you're starting to see it come out with like co-work, et cetera. But it's really around, hey, how do I create an agentic type of worker that has access to all this institutional knowledge that's done in a safe and secure way? So it's the idea that like the cloud, for instance, where all this stuff kind of sits on today, can be moved to on-prem. And I think that is going to be a key value proposition for the office. And employees will expect access to institutional knowledge to help drive product velocity accelerate the amount of outcomes or output that they have today by being able to go leverage those technologies when they're in the office that they won't be able to when they're on their homes, in their home networks or co-working, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think another piece that stood out to me in that conversation was this, like, because what do you say? You said, is it relationships are the last true competitive advantage?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other piece that I kind of hear when what hit me in his talk when I heard it the first time was, it's like institutional knowledge is actually the last, or y'all say that's the other like end of the spectrum as far as like a lever for a competitive advantage, right? Because you can go ask an LLM, pretty much anything, and it can, if you can fake it good enough, you basically sound like an expert. But where is all that information stored? Well, it's in, XYZ files. And so some of I'll call it the ability for companies to be able to unlock the access to that type of information. And really it's like the way I thought of it when I heard him present it the first time is like, oh, you're like physically opting in. Because has anybody been on a Teams call where there was not just an AI tool on there recording, but also an AI tool on there contributing? Well, that's
taking notes.
Yeah. So there's one taking notes now, but imagine that's obviously coming where there's another person on who is, and does that not feel like a little creepy kind of it certainly does, right? So, but I think this idea of a physical space that when you step in there, like you're going in there because you want it to collect everything. The other piece that's, we're kind of off the rails on this, but when I heard him speak about this the first time, because so I started our labor group 8 years ago, because we are the third largest commercial real estate firm in the country. You're spending 12 to 15x on your labor that you are the real estate, but we have nobody in our company who can tell you where you should go to find both the best labor and the cheapest labor. Or said differently, hey, if you can find 8% cheaper labor, your real estate's effectively free. But we're out there pitching our value prop of, hey, we can negotiate another $1 off your rent, right? We kind of the whole Peter Drucker finding the right answer to the wrong question. And what I heard as I've kind of got further into this labor ecosystem is oh, wow, this labor market is not that efficient. And even just think of it today, okay, you've got people on an annual wage, and then you do a review at the end of the year and you decide whether you're getting a 1, 2, 3, 5% bump, or maybe you did really good and you get a 12% bump. But imagine the companies who you're stepping into a space and they can directly map your contribution and your thoughts to the outcomes tied to these products that they're releasing, and how much more efficiently those companies will be able to compensate their individuals.
Yeah, it's happening today. I just read yesterday too that Amazon is tying bonuses to the amount of agentic output or leveraging AI tools per employee. But we've got 10 minutes left. I want to get really tactical around this stuff. So this isn't pie in the sky types of thinking at LinkedIn. We're building this. We've got a 150,000 square foot building in our headquarters that we're built that's coming online in May. That is going to be a relationship workplace. So we, kind of think about this from the dynamic workplace environments, which are highly flexible, neighborhood-based, no assigned seating, et cetera, to something that is an ambient type of environment. So, I mentioned earlier in this prezo that there's two things that stand out to me out of those stances. One, institutional knowledge is not commoditized. You have to have access to that to be able to go and really add value or get value out of the agents that you'll be working alongside with. And you have to do so in a secure type of environment. Those will happen in the office. We're building 70, we're calling them pods. We probably need to rethink what the brand is for these things, but think of them as ambient conference rooms. If you've ever been in a conference room with someone, you're having a one-on-one, you're going through some data and analysis, and generally, what's the next step out of that discussion? It's oh, well, let me go run this, and I'll come back to you in a week or two with the analysis based on the questions or the discussion that was being had. You will soon have an agent in the room with you that has access and context of all the information that you bring based on the data that you have access to in your enterprise suite, and you'll be able to ask that agent the very question that you historically ask somebody else that would have taken a couple of weeks to come back in a follow-on meeting real time and get the results real time. That's product velocity. That's amplifying outcomes real time. That's one. Two, the design of the spaces will be vastly different. So we talked a little bit about agency, access or enabling teams to do more with less, blurring the lines of historical roles, the seating environments are going to be very different. Again, thousands of startups into one full product builder mindset at LinkedIn, and we're seeing this across our peers, which are the other mega cap enterprises, tech enterprises in the industry. But you'll see team sizes get smaller. They'll have more agency to go do more. The seating environments will be different, and they'll have access to these types of pods specifically with the institutional knowledge that they have on their team to go and help devise and develop the products that they're trying to build. Again, I think like the talent attraction and retention is going to be incredibly important in this next phase of tech adoption for companies. There's going to be the companies that have, and then there's companies that don't have. The companies that have, that are going to be able to go and attract the best talent, which the talent will require and demand. I just heard the other day too that now like tokens, the accessibility to tokens, that's going to be a new incentive model just to be able to go use the tools that employees have been using. These are tech, the top engineers in the world, right? The top product designers in the world that are using on a daily basis. They need that. But effectively, when they come to the office, they're going to need to have access to the same type of technology built into the office environments. Building owners are going to need to go build it, whether it's a spec suite, whether it's integrated into their infrastructure. There's a strong network effect here for building owners to go do that for the occupiers and administrators of the spaces that are leasing space from them. And then two, employees are going to want it as well to be able to go and get the value out of coming into the office every day. Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we had the piece that we didn't touch on that probably is obvious with some of what we said. But again, it's like that power component. Power is the new scarce element in the value equation for much of the work that I'm doing now. The companies that were asking about, hey, where do I go to find this certain type of labor are now saying, hey, where can I go find, X amount of grid connected capacity within a, relatively narrow amount of time. So this kind of shift from the, to the cloud and or off-prem back on-prem, I think for some of these capabilities and for security purposes is another thing that, again, definitely not my area of expertise, but that's one of those things that I say, hey, I see that trend kind of playing out. I mean, Armin, what else? I mean, so I think we had also, the only other thing I think we had in our notes were like this shift from the knowledge economy to the innovation economy. Anything else you want to touch on or want to open it up for a couple minutes of Q&A?
No, I mean, I think the physical environments, the real estate is at the intersection of a lot of this change. It's an exciting time. We have to be nimble. We've got to take some high conviction bets because, again, no one really knows what's to come. But anchored around this idea that, like, institutional knowledge is not commoditized. Relationship is still the bedrock, and we are social creatures. Social capital is incredibly important as a human being. And teams and the way organizations that historically was structured or designed will absolutely change if they have not already. We have a couple minutes. Any questions?
Thank you. I'm Bob Duffy. In these seminars, we talk about real estate technology like we're one big country, but historically, there's usually a leader. A lot of times it's California, and it comes across east. Is there any one area that we can really look to that's doing real estate technology for office space better than other parts of the country?
We're developing a lot of this stuff in-house, and I suspect that there's going to be a lot of that. I think on the institutional side of things, companies like Envoy are doing a great job, and they're trying to tie in a total like workplace experience platform together. One thing we didn't talk about is like workplace experience applications. I think we're just kind of like, getting to the surface of this stuff where it's like, hey, what kind of food do you want to order? Or like, where's a conference room, et cetera. But with all the other prop tech that I think buildings are going to be investing in, there's an opportunity for that market, that industry to kind of take a leg up and being a lot more strategic. But Envoy, I guess, is the first that comes to mind.
And I would say geographically, like definitely, I mean, a narrative we've been preaching basically since we've been doing anything tied to labor is that throughout history, as technology advances, which we go through market cycles up and down, right? One thing that doesn't come down is the technological curve, and frankly, that's only steepening. And what that inherently does, it enables fewer people to create more of the value in the world. I think it's a really interesting time because basically it's never been easier to be 85th percentile than it is now. Because as long as you can learn how to use the most intelligent coworker that's ever existed, who also takes no credit for anything that you're asking him, you obviously can catapult ahead, but it also is really easy to fall behind. So I think what's going to be interesting is you're going to see this very small percentage of people that are innovating. And then there is a big opportunity kind of in the middle for what they call AI diffusion, which is saying like, hey, what percent of the people actually in organizations, because I saw a statement the other day that an organization only adapts as fast as its people. And I think we all know how fast you have to adapt to survive. And wrapping that all up it is like, I mean, even when I did that search a year and a half ago for agentic AI and I looked at it at the MSA level, it basically, the search term was, California was 100 in terms of on Google Trends. That's a fun way to kind of keep an eye on some of these data points. The Bay Area was at 100. The next highest was Austin at like a 45. And then I forget who was at like a 30. So it's like, it is clearly the innovation is happening in certain pockets. And if you look at the office markets that are ripping right now, it's New York, San Francisco, I actually don't know the Seattle story, but I would imagine it's doing quite a bit better. Like kind of the A+ markets are doing better. And you're seeing that in the economy too, right? That top decile income earner and the top 1%, they seem to be doing really well when everyone else maybe not as much. So it doesn't directly address your question, but I'll call it some signals.